to the Fabric of Healing and Common Threads project. I'm delighted that we have already almost 30 participants in this event today, and we had 90 some registered, so we'll hope that they join us shortly. And I would ask you to please mute yourselves for now, and when we join in discussion a little bit later, you can unmute yourself. Great, thank you. My name is Rachel Cohen. I'm founder and director of Common Threads Project. And I want to welcome all of you and thank New York Textile Month for inviting us to share this with you. I also want to thank my associate director, Jackie Wallace, who has curated the beautiful exhibit that you'll have a chance to see in a little while. First, we'll give you some background to think about and context for this exhibition. What we'll be doing is first sharing with you the whole concept of story cloths, an ancient tradition that our organization has borrowed from and been inspired by from the beginning. We do trauma work with women in situations where they have experienced mass trauma, atrocities of unimaginable sorts. And we find that this ancient tradition, this practice of sewing story cloths together can open the door to a process of very deep and transformative healing. And so rather than just looking at the textiles themselves, what we're going to do is think about this as a process, a healing process, and then it will deepen our appreciation for the textiles themselves and the stories that they can tell us. Okay. I'm going to be sharing my screen so that you can see a number of things, a PowerPoint that will help to explain what we do, and also a film in a few minutes, okay? Bear with me while I work out all the details here. Okay. Should be able to see my screen, I hope, or perhaps. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Okay, so this is our organization, Common Threads Project. Right, what I'd like to do is share with you a video that I made myself. That's a homespun thing. When I began to be very interested, almost 10 years ago now, in the possibilities of story cloths, narrative textiles. And I started to explore this phenomenon, which exists all over the world. And I made this little video to track my exploration. So I'll play it for you now. The ancient Greeks tell us the myth of Philomela, who was pursued and raped by Tyreus, when he cuts out her tongue to silence her so she can't protest. She weaves her story into a beautiful tapestry and sends it off to her sister, who then understands Philomena's predicament. It seems that women in many different times in history and in many diverse cultures have made textiles to break the silence, to heal themselves, and to tell their stories of survival. "40 years after her escape from the Nazis, Esther Krinitz undertook to tell her daughters and grandchildren exactly what had happened to her. She wanted them to know, to see, to feel, even to touch her personal history.
This is my family on the morning of October 15th, 1942. We were ordered by the Gestapo to leave our homes by 10 a.m. to join all other Jews on the road to Krasnik railroad station. And then to their deaths.
And my mother says, Gateskinder, efter wat je bleiben, go, maybe you will live.
The wagons left for Krasnik station, and we never saw our family again.
As Esther found some solace in stitching her way out of the darkness, so too have the Hmong people found their voices in intricate textile art.
There were women who would have really said, I can cry because it takes the tears. The cloth allows you to cry. It's a very community-oriented activity where women share and where women are very generous to the other. They support each other. So quite often when people have had trauma or experience violence or pain or loss, the fact that you have others who are in similar circumstances that are available for you is a very, I think, decisive element. When you are sewing, you keep at sewing and you talk and you share without having to look at the other person into the eyes. The sewing is a concrete action. It has for me the equivalent to going and protesting in the street. You are really exercising your right to respond to what has happened to you.
So I need to take a deep breath after watching this. You can probably feel yourselves how powerful it is to be witnessing these very diverse um, groups of women who sew their stories into cloth. And I was indeed so deeply moved by this phenomenon that I wanted to experiment with how we might use this very wise practice as a healing modality in our work with trauma survivors. I wanted to ask you to think about with me the ways in which you think sewing story cloths offers a therapeutic mode. What is it that is so healing about doing this? I'll share with you some of my thoughts, and we can discuss later as well what your reactions are. Okay. So one of the things that you know, if you engage in hand sewing, embroidery, stitching, applique, is that it is deeply self-regulating. The rhythmic, meditative action of sewing does something for the body, which we then can pair with dealing with such emotionally difficult material. When you do these, when you do the stitching while dealing with very difficult memories, terribly upsetting memories, it keeps one in a grounded state, which is remarkable. It's also much easier, as Roberta Bacik said in that little video, it's much easier to share with others when the hands are busy and when eye contact isn't expected. You're looking at your sewing, and you can actually divulge much more in that setting. It's a familiar activity. It's something that feels safe, that's connected with warm memories, maybe of mom and grandma and so forth. And it offers a way for people to express themselves non-verbally. And I'll get to that in just a moment, why that's so important. It's also very slow going. It takes a long time to make a story cloth, and that's much like the work of trauma therapy, which has to be taken very slowly and carefully. It also offers a sense of mastery because you get to do something beautiful with something so horrific. And the women in our circles also tell us that when you can put the memory out there in a tangible way, it brings about a sense of relief. And also one gets, the feelings of shame get replaced really by feelings of empowerment and of being able to do something skilled. It also connects women who are living in displacement. It often can connect them to a sense of their past and their cultural heritage, which they incorporate into the making of the story cloths. So when we do our healing circles, we're keeping in mind a number of really key principles. One is that it's so important for survivors of mass trauma to work collectively and to find healing with one another. Judith Herman has a beautiful quote from her book on trauma and healing. She says, "The solidarity of a group provides the strongest protection against terror and despair, and the strongest antidote to traumatic experience." So we believe in group therapy, group healing. We also think that all survivors deserve an opportunity for deep and transformative healing. And so we undertake a rather ambitious and comprehensive program of treatment. It's not a quick fix, unfortunately. And we also believe that healing mental health symptoms is just one element of a process of empowerment, which has to go far beyond that alone. Okay, don't be too put off by this picture of a brain. I'm just going to pause briefly here to acknowledge that this beautiful process of making story cloths happens to be validated by cutting-edge neurological research on trauma, which I think is just a gorgeous confluence, and also lets us know that what women have been doing for thousands of years is something that scientists are now finally understanding fully and validating. What happens in the moment of trauma basically is that the language centers of the brain shut down, go offline, so that left prefrontal cortex, where language and verbal processing exists, actually become inaccessible, more or less, in moments of mortal threat, while the visual and sensory systems activate in the service of survival. Yeah, and if we're going to find effective means of treating trauma and allowing people to heal fully, we have to access the nonverbal. And in fact, story cloths do just that. So we have developed programs in Common Threads Project you can see here on several continents in several locales, and currently we're working on some projects in the US. Of course, COVID has limited that process for us as we deal with ever changing and uncertain circumstances. But I want to also say and emphasize that one of the things that COVID does is has revealed really the shadow pandemic of violence against women that exists all over the globe, and that in fact has been exacerbated terribly by COVID, as people are shut in, often into situations of domestic violence, where they are silenced even more so and isolated from others, where services are harder and harder to access, and where the work that we do becomes more and more urgent. So our program that it exists in several, in Bosnia, Nepal, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ecuador, and now beginning also in the US, is our services are needed more than ever. And we are an organization that I hope you'll familiarize yourself with. And we welcome support of all kinds as we try to refine and expand our programs and reach more survivors over time. Here's some smiling faces from our program in Democratic Republic of Congo. You can see that they're very proud of the story cloths they've made. You'll see at the bottom some of our supporters, and we hope that you'll join us in the work that we're doing. Please contact us on this website. We're not finished yet, but I'm showing you the website so that you can take note of it, and please be in touch with us and see how you can become engaged in this process. Okay, I'm going to move on, and soon we'll get to the gallery where you'll be able to see story cloths from our current projects. So bear with me a moment while I transition us into the gallery. I want to especially thank the women who are sharing their story cloths with us in the gallery. Okay, I hope you can see our gallery, and you'll be able to visit in the exhibition on your own I'm going to take you through and just show you a sampling of a few of the 22 story cloths. They are all in the exhibit with explanations, the voices of the women from our programs, some videos that show, that we're not going to be looking at right now, but that show some of the local staff who work in these projects and some of the participants speaking about their experiences. We are also really hoping that you will share your thoughts and encouragement as you bear witness to these stories of suffering, of great courage, of healing. You have an important role to play as witnesses to these experiences. That's part of the healing process for these women. They really need to be heard and understood. In this first story cloth that I'm going to show you.
Okay. A young girl is abducted.
Sorry. This is from our project in Democratic Republic of Congo. I will tell you that part of the reason for this exhibit, really the main reason for this exhibit, is that the women have asked us to share their stories, to let the world know what's happening to them. And I was given some story cloths by the women in our groups in DRC, and they asked me, please take these with you and show people what we are experiencing. Pleaded with me. So that's what we're doing. We want to amplify the voices of these women. And we ask you to share this also with your friends and colleagues. This story cloth is called Forced to Marry My Rapist. I'm going to try to get you closer. Here you go. You'll notice that the woman who's made this story cloth, pictured here, appears to be at her wedding, but she refused. She was raped and held captive. And then her family and the family of the perpetrator, as is often the case, tried to force her to marry this man in order to save face. Instead, she ran away. She escaped. Unfortunately, they took her baby, born of rape. And she managed to, on foot, to escape to the town where we work, and she joined a healing group. And there she made this story cloth and was able to tell her story and begin the process of healing. What she says about this is quite stunning. She says, I made myself look invisible because no one really sees me. The group leaders asked the rest of the group, when do they feel invisible? And of course, many of them did. Go on to another story cloth. This is what I need you to know. I wonder if you can look closely at this. And see, this is made in Ecuador by a woman who had escaped from the paramilitary in Colombia on this river. She now lives on the other side of this little river in Ecuador. And we thought that she, at first, was going to talk about the the violence that she experienced at the hands of the paramilitary, her children on the river being shot at. But what we got into here was another story that you can see towards the bottom. And that was that that's her husband. You can see he's holding a bottle. He was too drunk to offer his help. And what she began to reveal in the process of the group was her history of domestic violence at the hands of her husband, and it was that underlying and private violence that she began to heal from and eventually left that violent relationship. We should go to this story cloth from Nepal, which is called We Are Like These Birds. Sorry. She works in a metaphor, which is a beautiful way to express things that might be too painful to approach directly. And she says, we are like these birds who are hunted. We are hungry. We've had to leave our nest. This is a refugee woman from Pakistan. We've had to leave our nest and fly somewhere unknown to this empty cage, which represents her experience as a refugee. Let me just show you a couple of more story cloths. I want you to have time also to discuss these. So we're going to go through the gallery. I hope you'll come back later and take your time through all of these. And to go to something called Dark Places in the Mind. This is another one from the DRC. We just read news yesterday of the mine. The mines in this area, one of them collapsed yesterday. Maybe 50 or 100 people are still missing. But the women who work in the mines tell us about the dark place where they're taken to be raped on a daily basis by the bosses of the mine. If they refuse, their wages are withheld. If they report this, they're threatened that they will be charged with theft in the mine and sent to jail. These are the women that we work with. Those are the women who said we want our story known. This is made by women in Bosnia as they remember back to the war, where only some crossed to safety, crossed this bridge when they had escaped from the hills where their villages were being attacked. They fled with their children and their men. The men were stopped at the bridge and only they were allowed to cross. And they remember this together collectively as they work on healing from that trauma. And this is a story cloth made as a group. Some of the story cloths are made individually and some by the group as a whole. I want to take you to a special place in the exhibit right here, which I hope you'll go to on your own time. You'll see a blue pocket, and that's the place where we'd like you to leave your messages for the women who make these textiles, so that they know that you have heard them and that you stand with them in solidarity. All right. I'm coming back to all of you so I can see you and you can see me again. All right. I would love to be able to spend some time now hearing from you, hearing your questions, your comments, and having a discussion together about what you've seen. So you'll need to, you're all, I believe, muted. You'll need to unmute yourself to make a comment. I'm also now able to see the chat, which I wasn't able to see earlier. So you're welcome to also put your questions in the chat. We can all see them there if you prefer to do it that way.
I have a question.
Oh, Jean, I see your picture. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, can you hear me?
Maybe I need to, let's see.
If other people can hear me, just do me a little hello.
Oh, I see what's happening.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, now I can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead, Jean.
Yes, hi. Calling, well, in this conference with all of you from Montreal, Canada. So I have a question about the process of partnership that is created, because I suppose that apart from the process of making the quilts, there's this relationship that is built with organizations there, or actually how does it unfold with all of these threads, we could say, that are linking one another in all these parts of the world?
Oh, thank you, Jean. That's a very important aspect that I'd love to share with you. Common Threads project is really focused on empowerment of local organizations. And so we partner with particular groups, women's organizations, and other local mental health organizations in order to groups that are providing services in their community already and have a relationship with women in their community. And they are the ones who deliver the service. They are the ones who lead the groups. We are only behind the scenes. We focus on training. We work collaboratively with the local staff, the local organization, who know the needs of the women much better than we do, and who also really know how to work with women in that setting in their community. So the programs are always adapted. You know, we suggest a model, and we do a very intensive training program of local clinicians, usually about 80 hours before they even begin an intervention. And then we follow and accompany that organization as they implement the adapted, culturally adapted intervention. And it's accompanied by a variety of other services as well, not just psychotherapy, but very often livelihood activities, legal services, medical services, and so on. It is not a standalone program. So I'm so glad you raised that question. And we choose partners very carefully and try to work in total collaboration rather than imposing our ideas on a community, which I think is a mistake we really try to avoid. Thanks, Jean. Yes. Other questions, comments? I welcome you. I'm looking in the comment in the chat box to see. Amanda asks if it's time limited. And I will say that we are, the basic intervention that we've developed is a very intensive 6-month intervention that meets, the women meet once a week typically, not always, typically once a week for about 4 to 5 hours workshop. And after that particular phase, they often continue on their own as their own self-directed peer group that does many different things, including sometimes advocacy work. And sometimes they assist for future groups that meet. They become assistants. Some have even gone on to help us with training. So there's a process of taking ownership of the group and empowerment. So oftentimes the women continue. We have some women in Nepal that are still meeting 4 years later after finishing their 6-month guided healing process. So another question comes from Michelle. How are you funded? There's the biggest challenge. We're funded by some private contributors who give anywhere from $10 to a few hundred. We're funded by a few small foundations who help us, and we are constantly looking for ways to support the organization in a sustainable way. And if any of you have ideas about that, or if you're in a position to contribute, we're enormously grateful. Or you may know people who might take an interest in this work, and we'd love to be connected with them. So that's an answer to that. Let's see, how many women do we want to work with? You know, we are a small organization, and we are scaling, we're in the process of scaling up so that we can reach more women. It really will depend on our growth and the capacity of partners. What we have in mind is that our partners, that our partners become experts such that they can train others in the future as well. That's the model. And that's already begun to happen quite a bit. For example, in Nepal, our program there, one of our earliest programs, the psychologists, the local psychologists are now training others and no longer need our help in doing so. Okay. Do the women, this is from Stephanie, do the women draft their story before sewing? Yes, yes, yes. In fact, they engage in, I mean, we didn't really go into the intervention very much, but they engage in art therapy activities for quite some time before they ever come to the story cloths. And then their first ideas about the story cloth are sketched, and they can choose to use markers, pencils, pen, and so forth. And then they talk about those sketches with one another and with the group. And it is a facilitated psychotherapy, so that a lot of the issues that emerge initially may come up in drawings and in planning the story cloth even before they sew. Okay, someone has a hand up. C. Grunwald. Oh, that's you. Go ahead.
Yep.
I'm sorry. Please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I hope others can.
Good. Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Kathy Grunewald. Rachel, I was wondering if you could share with us your academic background and perhaps your therapeutic training and how you came to this work. I think personal stories and these journeys are really helpful to the rest of us, knowing how you got here.
Thank you, Kathy. Sure, I'm a trained clinical psychologist. I've been in practice doing a lot of trauma work for probably 30 years. I'm not an art therapist, though I work very closely with art therapists, and I've been very influenced by them. And I really came to this work in a search for more effective methods for treating women who have experienced very severe brutalities in collective trauma. And I knew that some special and creative intervention was needed, that our talk therapies weren't doing the trick. And so I developed this out of really a series of coincidences in which I was exposed to the idea of story cloths. And then that's why I showed you that little video, to show you that I was seeing those story cloths, and the project really chose me rather than I choosing it, as so many things like that happen.
It often happens, yes.
Yes. So does that give you a sense of?
Yes, thank you very much.
Sure. Any other questions or comments about any of the preceding presentation, the work that we do, or perhaps the story cloths that you saw in the gallery, if any one of those especially touched you? Magali says, do you work differently with women from other cultures? Yes, absolutely. I think that's so important. And which is why we develop partnerships before we begin anything. We develop a relationship with a local partner who has expertise in their own culture and community. And we really try, our training is a two-way street. We're not just training the local clinicians, but they're training us equally on how to understand the local idioms of distress and of healing. And all of that gets incorporated very fully into the intervention. It's co-designed by the local staff and by us together in partnership. So for example, in our program in Ecuador, there were some indigenous cleansing rituals that were integrated into the program that were extraordinary, powerful, and moving. And we knew nothing of that practice ahead of time. There was also quite a bit of dancing in that program. In the DRC, there's a good deal of prayer and that the women do in their circles that comes out of their own healing practices that are very powerful for them. So in each instance there, the local staff really transform the intervention to make it fully culturally resonant. Okay. Many, okay. Vesna asks us to tell about the partner organizations that we work with. I can tell you about in each of the countries. We partner with Panzi Foundation in Democratic Republic of Congo, and that's the organization that's headed by Dr. Denis Mukwege, who was a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018, so you may know of him from there. And he has been doing work in the DRC with survivors of sexual violence who have had horrific injuries. He's a gynecologist and surgeon who has developed remarkable programs for the women to heal. And he understands deeply that they need to heal psychologically as well as physically. And they have a wonderful mental health staff to do that. That's one partner. Another partner we have is in Nepal, the TPO Nepal, that has really made this one of their core activities. Let's see, in Seattle, we are launching a program this year that's been postponed by COVID, but we are partnering with 4 refugee organizations that are headed by and run by refugees in the Seattle area. The Somali Family Safety Task Force, Mother Africa, the Refugee Women's Alliance, and the Asian Counseling and Referral Services. So we have a wide variety of partnerships in the field. Okay. How can we stay connected with you? Thank you, Claire. Please put yourself on our mailing list, join our social media, Facebook and Instagram. Write to me personally, Cohen at commonthreadsproject.org. We'd love to hear from you. And so please join this journey. Thanks for asking. Do we offer training for outside facilitators? Periodically we do. Thank you, Jean, and we'd love to include you. So we mostly have done training in the field, but we have done one training to expand our own core staff, and we may be doing that again in the future. So please do stay in touch with us about that if you are a mental health professional. Jackie, thank you so much for adding adding the links for everyone. We do appreciate that. So you can find us. Claire is working with Art and Remembrance. Wonderful, a gorgeous organization you should all know about, and that helped to inspire my journey from the beginning. Let's see. How do I decide where to do future projects? Well, we really look for partners who are highly motivated in the field, who have capacity to do this work, and are interested to develop a partnership. And that has happened in all kinds of ways. And I'm always interested in learning about new possibilities for partnerships. We have something brewing that I hope will come to fruition, perhaps in Tanzania, where there's a possibility. So we explore possibilities and see where that takes us. Okay. I'm scrolling through these many lovely comments and questions. I now see that many of you commented on on the mindfulness, and Eleanor says needlework connects many of us to our female ancestors. Yes, indeed. I think that's part of the healing as well. Okay, let me come back to the does anyone else have a hand raised who'd like to ask a question? Okay. Since I don't see. Oh, is there? Okay. Someone has raised a hand?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'm
who you are?
Anita Guard from
Hi,
Buffalo, New York. I'm just curious about where you are on the globe and where.
Oh, Ed, would you mind muting? There's someone coming on who I'd be happy to hear from, but wait just a moment and let me answer Anita's question. I'm our headquarters is in Brooklyn, New York,
you.
in my apartment, quite frankly. Right now I am broadcasting from the, as it were, from the Adirondack Mountains, where I'm in a cabin. Very grateful to be here. And Anita, where are you?
I'm in Buffalo, and I know.
Oh yes, you're near where I, yes.
Right, and I know Gina's in Montreal, and I just was curious about, I like to pinpoint where we are on the globe. Anyone out west in the horrible fires?
Mm.
No, I guess not.
We're wishing for your safety,
Right.
if that
Yeah.
applies to you. My goodness, we are. So many unbelievably challenging circumstances people are dealing with. Yeah. Well, here's what I'd like to do to wrap up. And thank you all so much for being with us today from so many places all over. Please do be sure to return to the exhibit, find the blue pocket, and leave your messages there, which you're welcome to do by either in text or if you'd like to leave a little video. We are making all of that available to the women in our circle so they can feel the support that comes to them from around the world, the moral support, the caring concern, and empathy that we can have as witnesses to their stories. I also, Jackie is placing in the chat the link to the exhibit, and I hope you'll visit there later. At the moment, I'd like you to just put 1 or 2 words in the chat, if you don't mind, just something that you will be taking with you today from this session we've had together. I'll be interested to hear what it is that resonates for each one of you personally. And then you can scan through those and see what your colleagues from around the globe might be thinking and feeling at this moment.